Hey everybody, this is Mr. Culp, and what I'm going to be doing in this screencastify is setting up for you to do this FDR and the federal government's New Deal measures chart, and that is right here. Okay. Before we can do that, and before I break that down, and this is going to take a little bit of time, I think this video will be close to about 20 minutes. There's a couple things here. Number one, what is this New Deal? Like, why is it called that? When FDR was running for president against Hoover in 1932, he said something in one of his speeches to the effect of, I pledge myself a new deal for the American people. And that phrase just seemed to resonate with the American public. The press jumped on it right away. Teddy Roosevelt had his square deal. Woodrow Wilson had his new freedom. And here was Franklin Roosevelt running for president at the height of the worst unemployment in history. 25% of the American workforce was unemployed. And just like you get a bad hand when you're dealt, let's say you're playing rummy or poker, and you know that you just have a bad hand, nothing would delight you better than to hear the dealer say, oh, I made a mistake. There's going to be a new deal. And that phrase just seemed to sort of give a little bit of optimism to a people that truly needed it. So that's number one. Number two, what are the goals of the New Deal? So Franklin Roosevelt wound up crushing Hoover in the 1932 election, and he's going to immediately set about getting Congress to pass legislation that will do one of three things. And this is what we're looking at right here. So all of the measures on this chart do one of three things, at least. Some of them actually do multiple things. But when we talk about any measure that is a relief measure, what are we looking to relieve? We're looking to relieve the record unemployment. So we'll come back down all the way down here. And here's an unemployment chart that we've seen earlier this week in our notes. And you can see these are the Hoover years after the stock market crash, which of course was just one symptom of an economy that was, in dire straits. The stock market crash is not the reason for the Great Depression. It's just a visible symptom of an economy that, that is something wrong with it. So after that, these are the years that Hoover was president, and the unemployment rate just kept skyrocketing, to 24%, where he's going to lose the 1932 election. So when we talk about these New Deal measures, a number of them are going to be specifically aimed at trying to relieve this, keep that from going further up. And if we go any further than this, you may lose everything. Everything, as one historian said, could have been lost in 1933. So, if it's a New Deal measure, like we're going to see with the WPA, and its aim is to relieve the record unemployment, we're going to put a star in this box to kind of help us identify what the goal of that New Deal measure was. If it is something that helps businesses specifically recover, then we're going to give that a circle and call that a recovery program or a recovery measure. So I'm sure you're familiar that this week, a record number of people filed for unemployment in our current situation with COVID-19. And the United States is going to rush everybody and businesses $2 trillion over the next couple months. A lot of that $2 trillion is to specifically help some businesses recover. So, for example, like the airline industry, which is suffering terribly right now. And then the last New Deal goal is going to be reform, passing laws so that this and something like this is unlikely ever to happen again. So there are going to be some measures that don't really do anything in regards to unemployment. They don't help businesses recover. They are solely being passed so that something like this, another Great Depression, doesn't happen in the future. Okay. So what I'm going to do for the rest of this screencastify is what I would probably do in the classroom. I'm going to kind of tackle first one as an example for all of you. We're going to go a mile deep and an inch wide. And what we're hoping to do is by the time we're done with this WPA and this screencastify, you'll be a little more comfortable at home filling in the rest of this chart, looking up CCC, AAA, NRA, all these here. All right. I did, by the way, fill out another example for you, the program known as FDIC, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. Maybe we'll say something at the very end in regards to that. So let's talk about this WPA. The first thing you're going to do is in this box is you are going to put what those initials stand for correctly. And if I can manipulate this correctly, the WPA specifically stood for the Works Progress Administration. Now I'm going to explain to you what that is, what that meant, how it operated, and at the end of that, after I show you a bunch of visuals, we'll come back and we'll explain why it was needed, who benefited, what it accomplished. Well, we can actually fill this in right now. This is going to be a relief measure, so I'm just going to insert that right now. And why is it needed? Well, again, all we got to do is go to the bottom of this page. The reason this one's passed during the first 100 days, and that's kind of critical to mention, is that a lot of these measures, not all of them, but a lot of them were passed during a whirlwind period of legislation that came to be known as the 100 days. And now many presidents, as they come into office, sort of try to measure up to Franklin Roosevelt's first 100 days because it was so impactful and so important to the nation at the time. So why was it needed? All right, well, we saw right there about 25% unemployment. It's simple enough and shouldn't be in bold. All right, so we have that. Why was it needed? All right, so we're going to explain like what it looked like. What does it mean? Who did it help, etc. So we're going to take a look at a bunch of visuals that I have down here for you. So these are primary documents because they're photographs or charts. And what the government does is the government takes its own money, some of which it has and some of which it borrows, and it's itself. The government is going to put the American people to work. It's not going to wait for companies to hang now hiring signs in their windows or for hire and with some job description after it. They're not going to wait for businesses. They themselves are going to put people to work through public works projects, which is what the WPA is. A bunch of huge public work projects. So what you see here is kind of an example of a WPA photo. All of these people here are being put to work and being paid for by the national government, not any particular local business or state business. And they're probably, this what you're looking at here is most likely road building And that was a very typical job that the WPA did. So here you see a poster from the WPA, and it has a lot of the jobs that it basically financed across the United States. You know, a lot of public swimming pools, a lot of courthouses, airports, etc. So I want to show you, let's jump down to, here's another photo. And what you have here in V4 is a number of men who are working. Looks like they're, again, paving a new street. And we'll talk about this man in just a second here. I want you to take a look at this photo, and I bet about a third of you will recognize what it is. So we're looking at visual 5A. And you're going, yeah, I've walked into that building. That's the post office in Conshohocken. That's exactly right. So post offices were a great way for the national government to kind of improve its own postal system and put people to work. So the government is going to spend a great deal of money. Congress passes this bill, the president signs it, and all of a sudden government money is being rushed to states and communities all across the United States. So when they came into the Plymouth Whitemarsh High School school district area, they went into Conshohocken, and they might have said to the civic leaders in Conshohocken, okay, listen, here we got all this government money. We want to put some people to work for about 3-4 months. What kind of projects will benefit the community most? And they might have said different things. All communities said maybe courthouse, maybe a hospital, maybe a high school. Then the government always kind of insisted on, well, unless you have a brand new post office, we want a new post office. We want to upgrade those facilities. And so Conshohocken was designated for one of those places. So here is the building that was built by local people out of work in Conshohocken. And I want you to now look at V5B here. So the government not only put people who had some skills like masons and electricians and carpenters back to work when they did these building projects, but they put some just genuine people who were unemployed, like a vacuum salesman who just lost his job. He might be hired as just a simple laborer. He mixed cement. He would, pile up bricks and bring them to the guys who had a little more skill. But what they also did was they actually thought of artists. And there were a lot of artists who couldn't sell their work during the Great Depression because very few people had extra money. And the rumor has it that there was a sculptor in Philadelphia who had been out of work, who had a very reputable name. And he was asked if he would come to Conshohocken and he would create a sculpture for this new post office. And you can see he did this beautiful job that actually is on the wall. So when you go through these doors, the windows are over here, and they take your mail, or they'll help you with postage here. But up on this wall, on this far wall up here, hangs this sculpture. And I'm not exactly sure what metal it is. I don't know if it's copper. I don't know if it's iron. Not exactly sure. I've never had a chance to inspect it closely, but it's of 3 WPA workers. That's how the artist decided to kind of make the theme of his sculpture. He decided to actually show men that were working on post offices like this. And that's pretty cool. So this post office is getting pretty old nowadays, by modern standards. And I would love to get that sculpture whenever they decide that this post office is out of date and they're going to build a new one. I would love to get that for Plymouth Whitemarsh High School. Here in V6, we see 4 more photos. So it just so happens that Conshohocken is kind of unique. There was a out-of-work sculpturer that they were able to hire. Usually what happened with post offices is they would hire an out-of-work painter that was local. And just like you see here, postmaster right there. They would hire these painters who were also out of work, and these people would paint these beautiful murals in these brand new post offices that were being built around the country. And they often did this with the high schools and the courthouses and a lot of the buildings that they were building through the WPA. It's just another way to get more people work. Here's another WPA project. I'm not sure if they're ripping up this railroad and they're going to pave a street. It's hard to say, but all I can tell you is that a number of these people are being put to work by the national government. The good news is a lot of people are going to be given work, and a lot of local economies will get a little boost in their spending. There'll be some self-esteem that kind of rises up. Now, V8 here, this is another picture that many of you might recognize. So this is a little guardhouse, or sometimes it's called like a little rest stop along the Wissahickon Valley Creek. So if you've ever gone down to Valley Green, you usually park at Bruno's, and then you start walking on that trail along the river. And you'll see some of these rustic looking structures, maybe down below or just a little bit off the path. And if you look close enough, you probably never realized this, but they were actually built by the Works Progress Administration in the 1930s. This was given to people. So again, the government came into the area. They said, hey, what can we do to improve the area? How can we put people to work? And someone said, hey, it would be great if we could have some structures that would, number one, help us give people rest. If they needed to just sit down for a little bit, there would be chairs, maybe a little picnic table here. People could eat. Sometimes these were used as guardhouses on the trail. But these structures, this is just one example of that a student took a number of years ago when we were doing the WPA project. And it's just more evidence of some buildings that are in a lot of local communities that are still around, but they were built by the WPA. I was talking about painters and sculptors earlier. I'll give you a second. Who do you think that lady is right there? I'm sure you saw her name in your textbooks. That is an old camera that she's holding. And if you said Dorothea Lange, you would be correct. She is another person that was hired by the WPA, as were hundreds of people, photographers and writers, and their jobs were to actually record and construct a history of the Great Depression. The government thought it was important that the Great Depression be documented. And this photo right here is what I think just about every American history textbook would have it in it. This photo of a Midwestern farmer and her children that are maybe like too embarrassed to look straight into the camera because of how dirty and unkept they may be. This photo was taken by Dorothea Lange, as was this one. And I can't tell you if this car, is on the move or not. I can tell you that they're basically treating this car / truck as a family camper. You can see the mattress there and the little kids, and this is all they have. And photographs like this give us a real glimpse into the Great Depression. And that's what a lot of these photographers did. They were hired by the WPA to record and document the Great Depression. And then there were a lot of writers who went all across America. Some of the most interesting stories are where some of those writers go to Indian reservations and they take down the histories from the oldest living Native Americans in their tribes, where a lot of those tribes had oral histories. Here was a chance to write those histories down and again create all kinds of documents for us today and future generations. I want you to look at this one for a second. Visual 9, the impact of this dynamic above. I think I had a picture up here as well. Yep, this picture would have the same dynamic, Visual 4. And by the way, here's another artist, by the way, just creating another drawing, or maybe this will become a painting. But this guy's also hired by the WPA to kind of, again, document all this work that people are doing. So we'll come back down to this one. It's a little larger. And here again, you see the WPA. A lot of times the government like to advertise that, these people are all working and it was the government responsible for putting them back to work. Just like when you have work done at your house, if you have a roofer and they're doing work on a new roof, they probably put a little sign out in front of your house on the lawn to kind of let everybody know, hey, look, see that nice new roof? That was Kelly Roofing that's put that on there. Nice free advertising. So the dynamic I'm speaking of are these gentlemen right here, obviously Black Americans. So, to the letter of the law was colorblind. Unfortunately, sometimes when it got down to the community level and community leaders made the decision on who got work and who didn't, sometimes some prejudices and pigheadedness got in the way. But as far as the national government was concerned, they wanted everybody back to work. And so, not in all cases, again, but in many, the WPA and a lot of these New Deal measures are colorblind. You see these gentlemen working here, and WPA hired them. All right. Well, the impact. Why am I mentioning this? What's the big deal? So, ever since Abe Lincoln and Congress, the Republican Congress, passed the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments that freed slaves, gave them citizenship, and allowed black males to vote, African Americans were overwhelmingly supportive toward the Republican Party. But then in 1932, actually 1933, as these New Deal measures became a part of the American landscape, a lot of African Americans started to question the Republicans who, under Herbert Hoover, unfortunately, again, Hoover may have acted a little too late. And, but we know Hoover was a good guy, but the Republican Party didn't seem to be helping or going out of their way to do anything for the African American community. And here was the New Deal, and a lot of African Americans are going to get work through a lot of these New Deal programs. And guess what happens? By the time 1936 rolls around, for the first time in history, African Americans kind of switch from the Republicans to the Democrats. You'll see sort of like this, you got this Republicans, this is where they used to go, but now their loyalties are going to switch, and they are overwhelmingly going to vote for FDR in the 1936 election. And the African Americans and Democratic Party have had a very strong relationship ever since. Not to say that all African Americans are Democrat, that is not the case by any stretch, but the majority of them are. And the Democratic Party has been able to kind of be the voice more so for the African American community than the Republicans, at least according to them. One more picture I want to show you, and then we'll wrap it up, get up to the top here. I'm going to blow this up so it's a little bit bigger for you. So here you got a bunch of suits, and they're kind of checking out the work for the WPA. Most likely some of these guys are local leaders. One or two may work for the government, but the one we're really kind of looking at here is the one in the center, the female. Take a guess who that is. I'm sure most of you are yelling at the screen right now the correct answer, and that's Eleanor Roosevelt, who winds up becoming one of the more important first ladies in American history. Because of Franklin Roosevelt's disability, because of polio, he's just physically not able to get around as much as he would like. And he was a little self-conscious about the American public seeing his handicap. I think most people understood that he had a handicap, but nobody really understood, not nobody, but most Americans didn't understand how severe the handicap was. And he didn't really give them a chance to kind of figure it out. So Eleanor, while their love life at that time, by the 1930s, isn't really where, a married couple's love life should be, they are a political team. And as far as being a communicator, Eleanor is a fantastic ambassador of the Roosevelt presidency. And she's going to be his eyes and ears. She's going to go out to a lot of these WPA sites. She's going to go to a lot of New Deal hot spots where the New Deal programs are in full effect. And she's going to talk to the people. She's the eyes and ears. She reports back to Franklin. And based on her reports, things go one way or things go another way. Just truly remarkable person that, deserves a little bit of time. Certainly 2 minutes in a screencastify about the New Deal. All right, I think we've gone over all of the visuals. These are just some charts to kind of document, again, 550 airports built or improved, 4,000 public works projects around, controlling flood and drought. All right, so let's come back up to the top here. Let's fill it out. Now we've seen a lot. All right, let's get this going, Culp. Who benefits? All right, well, let's talk about that. So it's pretty obvious. Why is it needed? 25% unemployment. Who's going to benefit? Unemployed. That's one. Who else is going to benefit? Well, with all these new hospitals, new high schools, new post offices, certainly you got to talk about the local communities. They're certainly going to be helped. Let me quick tell you, something before, and this kind of sets up what did all this accomplish. Let me tell you a quick little story about maybe someone. Now, this is fictional, but this happened all around the United States. Suppose a man who was, let's say, a salesman loses his job in 1930 as a result of everything that happens after 1921. Excuse me, 1929. This guy loses his job, but the next day he puts on a suit. He kisses his wife goodbye. He waves goodbye to his kids in his nice, very small house. And he says, "Hey, look, I'm going to go out and I'm going to find a new job. I'm going to find something else." And he's full of optimism. He kind of brushes out the door lightly on his feet. And 9 hours later, he comes back and, his shoulders are a little slumped. His hat in his hand. His wife said, "How'd it go? How'd it go?" And the kids are like, "Hey, Dad, hey, Dad." And he basically says, "Boy, well, apparently there's a lot of people out there who are in the same fix I am. But tomorrow I'll wake up a little earlier. I'll get out there a little sooner and I'll find something. Don't worry, everything will be okay." And the next day he does wake up earlier and he puts on his suit and tie and he's out the door to try to find some work. Same thing happens 7, 8 hours later. He comes back. He's a little dejected, and day after day that continues to happen. And pretty soon, like after a few weeks, his wife doesn't even bother to ask how to go because she knows that it'll only make him a little bit more miserable if he wasn't able to find work. Things are getting tough. The unemployment's just getting worse. It's not getting better. Eventually, they have to sell that little house and they have to move into an apartment now. So they're downsizing to try to keep it up and keep coping. Months and months go by. They have to sell some of their possessions. You're going to see some of this in Cinderella Man. You'll see something very similar to that. This guy hasn't worked in over a year, nothing steady. He's gotten a job for a day or two here, kind of a handout there. He's sold some apples on the streets. He has taken some handouts. He's on public welfare, which is FARA at this point, but nothing's going well. And then all of a sudden he hears on the radio, he hears about Franklin Roosevelt and this WPA program, and he finds out through a friend that they're going to be coming to Conshohocken. So he gets up super early the next day and he heads down to the township community office, okay, the community leadership building. And sure enough, there's a small line of men there, and there's a government employee, and he's saying, "Hey, listen, we can hire this many men for this long." And they come to interview this gentleman, and he basically says, "Hey, look, I'm a salesman. I don't have a lot of building material experiences." They said, "That's all right. You can be a laborer, right? You got strong hands, strong back." And he goes, "Yeah, I can do that." And sure enough, they say, "Look, you got a job. You're going to start working. Show up at 8th and Fayette at 7 o'clock tomorrow morning. Be there." And this guy does that. And he rushes home, and all of a sudden the door swings open, and he says, honey, and she's like, what's wrong, now? And he says, nothing's wrong, I have just got a job. And the kids kind of perk up, like, what did he just say, job? And his wife's like, what do you mean, what kind of job? What is just everybody's pessimism is now kind of spewing out. And he says, nope, I got a job. Remember that thing we were listening to on the radio and that fireside chat, and Roosevelt was talking about this program? Well, I got a job with this program. I'm going to be helping to build a new post office starting tomorrow. I'm just going to be a common laborer, but they guaranteed me 30 hours a week for at least 3 months. And just, so, let's picture this. Well, this is the finished product, but, imagine this guy goes down to this area at 8th and Fayette, and, he helps a mason, a very talented mason. He mixes his cement, he brings him his bricks, he does a lot of the labor for this gentleman. And a week goes by, and this guy gets his first paycheck. This guy who's been out of work, regular work, for so long, gets his first paycheck. Wow, what the sense of relief and accomplishment. And I shouldn't say men, because there were some women that got jobs through the WPA. We just showed you one, right? Dorothea Lange. But most of them were men, because most of the unemployed were men. So this guy just gets his paycheck. He swings in the door, and he says, "Hey kids, put on your outfits, put on your good shoes. Dad's taking you out to dinner tonight." And really, Dad? Really, we're going out to dinner? You pick it, pizza or hoagies. We're gonna go treat you guys. I know it's been rough. Things are gonna get better now. Let's go give a local business a little bit of money as well. Let's help them too. And I'll tell you what, just the idea that, these guys are now not taking handouts, that they've got regular work, the self-esteem that this New Deal program brought back, the amount of work, 4 million people over the next 7 years will get work through the Works Progress Administration. So when we talk about why do we have that star there? Again, it's never going to totally reverse. The New Deal measures will never totally end the depression, get these numbers down in here where it's tolerable. But they sure as heck keep the depression from getting a whole lot worse. You don't see that same trend in 1933 that you see, before that, right? Everything's going up, 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 up. What you start to see with the WPA and some of these other relief measures is you'll start to see that number come down. It's still very high, very, very high. And all these programs are going to cost the government a lot of money, but people keep faith in our economic and democratic system. That's going to be one of the best things about the New Deal. People don't give up hope like they did in Germany and elect a radical like Adolf Hitler. So, what accomplished, we could also put in here thousands of brand new buildings and roads. All right, now we kind of explained that long and hard. I get it, and I appreciate you guys listening. But now when you go to look up the CCC, the AAA, the NRA, and some of these other New Deal measures, many of them that were a part of the first 100 days, again, as we said, you'll know exactly what we're looking for in these columns. You'll know what to do here. You'll know what to do here. And, while we're speaking to this, nobody asked a question. And you know why that is? Because you're listening to an audio, right? That's why you didn't ask. You didn't think you'd get an answer. But I'm going to answer it for you. Why do you have the initials here? Why don't you just have the full name? Well, it actually started with the full name. So when Franklin Roosevelt, the new president, would go on the radio and in one of his fireside chats, as they became known as, would explain these New Deal measures. They were all known by their long names: the Works Progress Administration, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, the Tennessee Valley Authority. But these alphabet agencies, as they became known as, a lot of people just started to shorten these long names into their just initials. So they just stopped saying Works Progress Administration. It just seemed like a mouthful. And they just started quickly calling it the WPA, and everybody kind of knew what that meant. Well, people thought that Franklin Roosevelt and the national government were doing so much to at least try. They were trying to help the American people and the American system, that pretty soon they stopped calling him Franklin D. Roosevelt or Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and they started affectionately calling him by his initials. And that's how it came to be that he became known as FDR. Most people called him Franklin or Franklin Roosevelt before that, but after the first 4 years of these New Deal measures taking impact and taking effect, he became affectionately known by many. Not everybody, all right, certainly not by a lot of Republicans. They didn't affectionately call him FDR, but most Americans did. And that's why this guy will go on to win 4 elections, because people felt like he was more effective at his job than other choices in the 1930s. So there you guys have it. All right, I expect this to be done and handed in the next couple of days. All right, I want to see your work and I want to see what you turn up. I'm going to give you a couple resources to look at, some visuals for the CCC, as it's one of my favorites, but there's a lot to talk about coming up after you guys are done this and have done that legwork. All right, thanks and have a great day or evening, whatever it may be for you. See ya.